What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out the Transformers Studio Series Bumblebee movie, core class, Starscream. Now, it Hasbro made the rest of the lineup half as good as this guy, then I do think that maybe the future of core class in general would have looked a little brighter, because when it does come down to his robot mode, it's like they've taken the Voyager class version and have simply shrunken it down to this scale point. This guy appears to be incredibly close to his CG render, which I think is seriously impressive considering that this is a live action movie design. Now, as we check out the details, the head sculpt is looking sick. The amount of mechanized detail they were able to pack into not only the face piece but also surrounding the neck looks really well done. I also really like the way in which the cockpit has been configured. Yet again, takes a lot of inspiration from the transformation as seen on the Voyager class version, and in terms of the rest of the design, this guy is just looking solid. I really do think when it came down to the Bumblebee movie, these guys were the perfect amalgamation of both G1 and live action, and if the Decepticons are to make their resurgence in the next film, I'm really hoping that we see way more of these designs, because whilst there is no denying that the opening sequence is an absolute banger, I do think there were so many characters, Starscream included, who unfortunately were wasted. Now, as we spin this guy around to both the side and the back, yet again appearing to be incredibly tidy. Now, for whatever reason, if you weren't a huge fan of the gaping hole on the back, this is where you can definitely bring out the weapon storage, because the blaster is able to be overslung and can completely fill out that hole with no issue at all. So to be honest, guys, this really is a banging pocket-sized Transformer and will no doubt make for a brilliant companion piece stacked up alongside the Bumblebee movie Shockwave. Now, in terms of accessories, unfortunately we never saw the Seekers wield their iconic null rays, so instead we have this null cannon, which I believe we only ever see Blitzwing actually use in the movie in order to face off against B-127, but this is still a pretty decent inclusion and has a huge role to play once it does come round to that Cybertronian jet mode. Now, in terms of posability, this guy really isn't going to be breaking any records anytime soon, but by the standards seen by the core class already, it still is pretty nifty. So in addition to the head sculpt packing an incredibly sturdy swivel joint, the wings are able to crunch both in and out, the shoulders are ball jointed so these can kick forwards, they can then kick backwards as well as out to the side. The elbow bend also technically acts as the bicep swivel, although all of the joints on this guy are surprisingly incredibly sturdy. Unfortunately, unlike the Voyager class version, there is no form of waist articulation, but to be honest, for the scale and the price point, I do think that was kind of a given. The hips, however, have no issues in kicking forwards that far, so when it does come down to giving Lord Megatron a good old kick in, this guy should have no issues at all. They can then also kick out to the side, and much like the elbows, the knee bend also acts as the thigh swivel, and then can also bend in roughly to 90. Unfortunately, there is no form of ankle rocker, but with all that being said, you are still able to pull off some pretty dynamic poses with this guy, especially when paired with the pretty wicked null cannon. Now, when it comes down to some robot mode size comparisons, we are yet again throwing it back to the origins of this character by bringing out the Transformers Kingdom G1 Starscream. So to kind of go back to my earlier point, what an excellent translation from that original 80s cartoon show here into live action. The only part of this design that I would change if given the option to do so would be the return of some proper shoulder mounted null rays. But when it does come down to these two figures, they are both incredibly solid, and I'm just hoping that this B-movie Starscream receives the same repaint treatment as this Kingdom Starscream. But until then, here we have the Bumblebee movie Shockwave, and I think it is straight up nuts that there is roughly a 3-year gap between these two releases. By this point, we could have had a solid micro collection of some of those amazing B-movie designs, but considering that there are heavy rumours that core class is set to be discontinued by the end of this year, unfortunately as of right now that is looking to be super unlikely. So until then, I will totally be pairing this Starscream alongside some of my third-party Lucky Cat releases, such as this pretty wicked legend scale Bumblebee. And whilst right now their version of Optimus Prime does appear to be slightly too tall, I actually think these make for awesome companion pieces, especially if you were to recreate the awesome opening sequence of the movie where Prime does pull off the iconic G1 pose and begins blasting the crap out of those Decepticon Seekers. For some general core class size comparisons, here we have the Kingdom G1 Megatron, the Transformers Dark of the Moon Bumblebee, Rise of the Beasts RC, and Noah Diaz's Exosuit, the Transformers The Last Knight Mohawk, the Studio Series 86 Deluxe Class Bumblebee, and then finally the Voyager Class B-Movie Starscream. Now I really don't want it to seem like I'm blowing too much smoke up the design team's ass, but seriously, to get this design, which is arguably one of the more complex from that opening sequence, into this scale point and for it to still look to be an absolute banger, honestly guys, I think that is super impressive. Transformation time for Starscream, yet again an incredibly well engineered little figure. So for the first step, take the forearm and swing this here inwards. We are then going to kick outwards at the shoulder and do exactly the same on the opposite side. So swing inwards and then kick outwards. We are then going to spin down here to the legs, where stored on the inside will be the rear fin. So you are going to detach that and then swing this here all the way around like that. Again guys, make sure to do the same for the opposite side. Detach and swing all the way out like that. Then for the next step, we can now take a hold of the foot and swing this here inwards like this. Again, make sure to do the same on the opposite side. Now with that all said and done, here is where you are totally going to make use out of those ball jointed knees. So these two are also going to swing inwards like this, and as I'm sure you guys would then guess, we are going to proceed to directly combine these here down the middle. With that now all said and done, we can come back up here to the torso, where we are going to take the head and the neck and slide this here all the way back until eventually it does very nicely click there into place. Make sure the shoulders are completely T-posing like this, because we are now going to spin here to the side. So you are going to take the hips and angle these here upwards like that. Now stored on the underside is a pretty mighty ball joint which actually holds the cockpit in place. So we are going to take the cockpit, we are going to angle this here backwards, and then we are going to spin this here all the way around exactly like this. Now a recommendation to you guys would be to get this as straight as possible like this, because there are two major points of connection that you must make sure that you lock in. So these tabs are going to slide into those slots, and on the top of the feet were also some slots which are going to attach into these tabs. So first of all, bring those hip joints here down, make sure that these tabs do very nicely click into place. Then we can spin around here to the side, take the feet and snap these here into the robot mode intakes. Then what you're going to do is take a hold of the forearms, and the fists are very nicely going to clasp over the top of these pegs. Again guys, make sure to do the same for the opposite side. Now we can spin here to the underside of Starscream, where the nose cone is very cleverly hidden inside this guy's cockpit. Now to be honest, this can be an absolute pain in the butt to pull out, but once all is said and done, you should be left with something which looks exactly like this. It is now at this point where we can bring out the null cannon, and as I'm sure you guys would then guess, this is very nicely going to store on the underside of Starscream. And bang! Here we have Starscream fully transformed into his Cybertronian Tetrajet. Now to be honest guys, whilst this isn't as solid looking as the robot mode, I still think they've done a pretty banging job in translating that rather complex design over into a considerably smaller scale point. And this is actually a great throwback to the very first time that we did see the Seekers in the original G1 cartoon series. So as we check out the details and the overall design, I actually think they've nailed the shape, especially when you check out those wings. They're angled backwards to match how they did very briefly appear in the movie, and to be honest, if I was to find one thing to complain about, it would be the visible forearms and fists. But you know what? I actually think these integrate even better in comparison to what we did see from the Transformers 1 Deluxe Class Optimus Prime. I think it's really impressive from a design standpoint how they have taken the boosters of the robot mode and have doubled these into the thrusters of the jet mode. And as we spin this guy here to the underside, packed beneath is that pretty deadly null cannon, which is surprisingly totally blast effect compatible, so when it does come down to obeying the commands of Shockwave and annihilating those launch pads, Starscream should have no issues in preventing the Autobots from making their great escape. Soaring through the battlefield of Cybertron to bring you guys some jet mode size comparisons, first up we have the Transformers Kingdom G1 Starscream. Now considering the price point and the scale between these two, I was pleasantly surprised to see the amount of mass shifting that does go down when it comes around to this B-movie Starscream. Next up we are bringing out his partner in crime, we have the B-movie Shockwave. And to kind of go back to my earlier point, it really is just such a shame that there has been so long between these two releases. By this point we could have been left with a pretty a decent chunk of the B-movie cast, because these two are actually bangers, really great cheaper alternatives to their Voyager class counterparts, and considering that going into 2025, right now Core Class doesn't appear to be a part of the lineup, it really does just suck that we are just going to be left with both Shockwave and Starscream, because I think it would have been awesome had we also had the likes of Megatron, Optimus Prime, and of course Bumblebee. Which, speaking of, here we have the Studio Series 86 version, just to really give you guys a sense of scale between these two. And then finally, we are bringing out the Big Daddy himself, the Voyager class Starscream. And to be honest, I actually think this Core Class version does a few things better in comparison to its big brother. The first one being that when in jet mode, it is way more stable to actually plonk along the ground. I always found that when it came around to this version, it definitely did have a tendency to lean backwards. But to kind of go back to my earlier point, they did a great job in translating this much larger design into the Core Class scale point. So, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers Studio Series Bumblebee movie Core Class Starscream. This is a great pocket-sized Transformer and a much more affordable alternative to the Voyager class counterpart, which, speaking of, when it does come down to that robot mode, is quite simply like they took that original figure and have just shrunken it down to the Core Class price point. To be honest, I really don't have many issues with this guy at all. Even the articulation, which whilst may not be mind-blowing, still allows you to get this guy into some pretty dynamic poses. The transformation I thought was fantastic for a Core Class, and it results in a fairly accurate looking Cybertronian Tetrajet. The biggest downside to this guy for myself would be that unfortunately, as of right now, he only has Shockwave as a companion piece, and with rumours that going into 2025 Core Class is set to be discontinued, unfortunately it really doesn't look as if though they are set to expand upon the B-movie cast, which I do think is a slight shame, which means unfortunately unless you have Shockwave, this guy really is just going to stick out like a sore thumb, and I'm really hoping that maybe they do change their decision and begin to release more individual Core Class figures in the future, because this, at least for myself, is definitely the perfect example of how good Core Class can actually be. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on this Bumblebee movie Starscream down in the comment section below. What do you guys think? I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next video, transform and roll out!